MAGA's deafening silence on Gaza's flower massacre is a new low. I'm just going to go over details of that event, and it's very concerning. I don't know what's happened over there. Nobody really knows what's happened over there. We can only go by these outlets and sources. Here I got Al Jazeera, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, even Peacock, MSNBC, Israel themselves. But if you have information that shows otherwise, let me know. I have not seen it. Where is our own intelligence on this? I've not seen that. What happened was on February 29th, 2024, a profoundly tragic event unfolded in Gaza. Later, it became termed as the Flower Massacre. At approximately 4:30 local time, this incident took place on Harun al-Rashid Street, where a large crowd of Palestinian civilians had gathered in anticipation of aid trucks believed to be carrying flour, a much-needed commodity amidst the severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
In the early hours of the morning, thousands of people flocked to Al-Rashid Road, southwest of Gaza City, desperate for aid. Instead, survivors say they walked into a trap. By the time the sun rose, the extent of the horror was clear. The dead and the dying lying side by side, gunned down by Israeli fire.
The Israelis just opened random fire on us, as if it was a trap. Once we approached the aid trucks, the Israeli tanks and warplanes started firing on us. If this continues like this, we do not want any aid delivered at all. Every convoy coming means another massacre.
Instead of aid, they've come away with the dead. By donkey cart, car and makeshift stretchers, the wounded are taken to nearby hospitals, all of which are overwhelmed and barely functioning.
This is exactly what we have been warning about, the hospital being out of service amid this massive influx of patients. We are operating on batteries. Most of our victims are in critical condition, which requires urgent surgical intervention. But the hospital is without operating rooms. I stand helpless. We are simply administering first aid treatment only.
One of the survivors says bodies are still lying on the streets where they were gunned down.
As soon as the aid trucks entered, the Israelis started shelling and shooting everyone who was on the road. They opened fire randomly, killing innocent men and women in cold blood. There was gunfire, snipers shooting, tanks shelling, and drones.
Palestinians are left with few options: starve to death slowly or risk losing their lives collecting aid. Mike Lappel, Al Jazeera.
The assembly of people driven by the desperate need for food supplies ended in catastrophe when Israel troops opened fire on those waiting for the aid. The violent confrontation resulted in at least 112 Palestinians being killed and more than 750 wounded. The incident quickly escalated into a significant tragedy, highlighting the dire conditions faced by the residents of Gaza and the extreme measures taken during the conflict. Details: a convoy of aid trucks believed to be carrying flour passed through a checkpoint and headed north. The Israeli military reported that a convoy of 31 trucks entered Gaza, with nearly 20 reaching the north on the preceding Monday and Tuesday. As large groups of people congregated waiting for the much-needed aid, they were indiscriminately shot at by military equipment, as reported by Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud from Rafah. The Associated Press noted that people began pulling boxes of flour and canned goods off the trucks. After a brief cessation, when people returned to the trucks, the Israeli soldiers resumed firing. Al Jazeera's Ismail Al-Gold, reporting from the scene, stated that Israeli tanks advanced after the shooting, running over many of the dead and injured bodies. Location and context: this incident took place on Al Rashid Street at the Nabulsi roundabout on the southwestern side of Gaza City, an area where northern Gaza where food deliveries have been scarce. So these are just people who are hungry looking for food, and they have a lot to lose if they can't get it. They're on the brink of famine. The first deliveries in over a month arrived that week, the day before the massacre. Carl Sko, Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Program, informed the UN Security Council that over 500,000 people, or 1 in 4 in the area, were at risk of famine, with 1 in every 6 children below the age of 2 considered acutely malnourished. I got a lot of this from this article that says Flower Massacre, Al Jazeera, how Gaza food killings unfolded and Israel's story changed. Witness accounts an Israeli military response. Palestinian witnesses described the event, and they said that there were some challenges here, with Israeli forces firing on a crowd waiting to collect desperately needed food. Some felt it was a deliberate trap or ambush. Initially, the Israeli military attributed the incident to the crowd being crushed and trampled during a stampede when aid trucks arrived. However, their narrative evolved, later stating that their troops felt threatened by the approaching crowd, prompting them to fire. The explanation of how the crowd posed a threat was not provided. In regards to the Flower Massacre, if you want to know where the stampede narrative came from, this is Alon Levy on X. It says, Israeli government spokesman in the October 7 war. In a post on X, Alon says, it's tragic that people got crushed in a stampede to storm aid trucks and run over by the truck drivers.
And if that's what it shows, why isn't there more of an effort to make sure people don't starve to death on top of the violence?
My heart really goes out to the individuals who were crushed in that stampede and who were run over when the truck drivers, whose aid was being looted, tried to escape and ran them over. It's horrific. And my heart goes out to civilians as well who know and have seen that Hamas is hijacking aid and feel betrayed by the UN agencies that have said nothing about the terror organizations stealing aid. Now let's look about what we are doing as Israel to facilitate the provision of aid into the Gaza Strip, because it's important. There is excess capacity at the Israeli crossings for more aid to enter. We can facilitate as much as the world wants to send in. Not only by land, we've facilitated aid drops as well. The problem is that the UN is struggling to distribute the aid at the pace that Israel is facilitating its entry. Aid is piling up not on the Israeli side of the crossings, but on the Gazan side of the crossings, where the UN is struggling to distribute that aid.
Can Israel not do more within Gaza to distribute the aid?
We're working together with international partners, and the convoy you saw was, I believe, the 4th this week going into the northern Gaza Strip, and we're working on finding new ways to deliver aid into northern Gaza. This convoy was part of a private contract with the private sector to try to get aid in, because the problem till now, aid has been distributed through UNRWA. And as has been widely established by now, that's an agency that was working as a Hamas front, riddled with terrorists, covering up for Hamas, trying to steal the aid. And so we're trying to find new ways in an impossibly challenging environment to make sure that the civilians who need aid can get it and that Hamas cannot steal it for its military purpose.
There are certainly accusations against UNRWA. I don't know if everybody is on board with saying it was riddled with...
oh, no, there are many who are still trying to cover this up.
The UN is pushing back on that. Alon, it's good to have you. Alon Levy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie,
for being here.
Impact on humanitarian aid. The incident underscored the challenges and dangers associated with delivering aid in Gaza. According to Carl Sko of the WFP, the risk of famine was exacerbated by difficulties in bringing critical food supplies into Gaza in sufficient quantities and the nearly impossible operating conditions for staff on the ground. Global reactions. The event drew strong condemnation from various quarters, not including Make America Great Again, including, though, the Office of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, UN Chief Antonio Guterres, and the international community calls for accountability, truth, justice, and respect for international law were echoed across the globe. Implications for the war and peace efforts. This tragic event, one of the deadliest single incidents in Israel's war on Gaza, occurred amid ongoing negotiations between Israel and Hamas aimed at securing a ceasefire and facilitating the delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza. The massacre led to warnings from Hamas about the potential cessation of participation in negotiations. So they threatened to stop negotiations. And there's the article. Let me know why MAGA is silent. Let me know what we can do to change that.
Middle MAGA.